We were finished with our history lesson and landed the DeLorean on the train tracks of today. You know, the part where the train pulverizes it. Because recently, the Supreme Court has come out with a series of decisions that we here at Cody's Shody like to call bad. In the 2021 to 2022 term, the United States Supreme Court, going almost entirely along ideological lines, voted to broaden and strengthen the Second Amendment, expand the role of religion in public life, limit the EPA's authority to regulate carbon emissions, strike down a campaign finance law, restrict relief for prisoners challenging their convictions, and limit the ability of citizens to sue police officers and federal agents for alleged constitutional violations. Looking at the cumulative effects of these cases and seeing the speed with which they've come out and the absolute vitriol with which they were decided, it's tempting to say something along the lines of, after all, how could so many terrible things happen in such a short amount of time? I mean, we know how that can happen as the country continues like it has been. But how does that happen in the Supreme Court is the question. For starters, I really need to re-emphasize that the Supreme Court is absolutely not an apolitical entity that's impartially gifting us with judgments based on a singular interpretation of the Constitution. Even if that was what they were doing, why would we care about following every word of the Constitution in the first place? Have you seen who wrote it? Freaking Snow Roach's convention. But again, as the Lochner era and what's happening today shows, the Supreme Court is very much political. The justices are appointed by politicians, after all. And while you could argue that those politicians were appointed by a democratic process, were they? Is it democratic when the person who won the popular vote doesn't become president? Is it democratic when the state with 500,000 people is represented with the same number of senators as the state with nearly 40 million people? Nothing about the Supreme Court is actually democratic or impartial or apolitical. It never has been. And I want you to remember that when we talk about this problem. But going back to how this happens now, probably the best answer is that all these recent rulings were kind of like the ending of Avengers Endgame, in that there was a lot of backstory and lead up with an oddly colored dude at the center of it all. Because what's happening now isn't actually happening quickly. It's just the culmination of a very slow, years-long effort by conservatives to control the courts throughout the country. Ironically, while Republicans have spent a lot of their time accusing Democrats and progressives of wanting to pack and expand the courts to benefit our evil gay trans agenda, the GOP has been doing it for a literal decade. And it's largely thanks to one guy. Ooh, I wonder who it is. Maybe it's Harry Styles. That guy's hot right now, huh? Do we have a picture? Ah, there he is. Hi, Mitch. You fucking phantasm, you. Mitch has seemingly made taking over the courts his life's work, consistently putting it above other important things like bipartisan cooperation and moisturizing. In 2018, he described his goal as to do everything we can, for as long as we can, to transform the federal judiciary, because everything else we do is transitory. And in a way, he was kind of right. Laws can be changed, executive orders can be revoked, federal guidelines can be altered, but most court appointments are for life. And the more you can jam in while your party is in power, the fewer vacancies you leave for the other party.
I was shocked that former President Obama left so many vacancies and didn't try to fill those positions.
I'll tell you why. I was in charge of the of what we did the last 2 years of the Obama administration.
I will give you full credit for that. And by the way, take a bow. All right, that was a good line.
Man, why haven't the Ghostbusters gotten him yet? That's a clip from 2019, back when Mitch was advertising his book, The Long Game. No, that title isn't a reference to his unusually long and thin penis. Yes, it's like a single spaghetti. But rather, in it, he explicitly describes his plan to block Democratic judicial appointments and replace them with conservative judges. The most famous example of this is obviously Merrick Garland. In 2016, after Antonin Scalia's body finally caught up to his soul, Mitch argued that because Obama was in the last year of his presidency, he didn't have the right to appoint a replacement, and that Congress should wait until the next president was elected to choose. This is obviously total bullshit and completely unprecedented. After all, Mitch announced his intentions before Obama had even chosen Garland, and flatly refused to hold any kind of hearing or proceeding at all. And because the Republicans controlled the Senate at the time, there was nothing the Obama administration could do, and the seat remained unfilled until Trump took office and appointed Neil Gorsuch. The kicker was, of course, the obvious hypocrisy when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and Mitch took the exact opposite stance and rushed through the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett. Because, as we all kinda know, Mitch McConnell doesn't actually believe in anything, and seems to be cartoonishly villainous. Like, geez, Mitch, dial it back a bit. Reel it in, like you reel in your long, thin dick. While this was all a devastating blow in and of itself, the Obama stuff also only happened because of another huge conservative win, which was when Republicans triggered the nuclear option and eliminated the filibuster for SCOTUS nominations. That meant appointees only need a simple 51-vote majority to be confirmed instead of the previous 60 votes. Democrats were actually the first to use this option in 2013 for judicial nominations other than for the Supreme Court, a fact Republicans were quick to point out in defense of Mitch's decision, but they only did so because, you guessed it, Republicans were blocking Obama's nominees early in his second term, forcing the majority leader Harry Reid to do something drastic if he wanted to get anything done at all. Technically speaking, eliminating the filibuster should benefit both sides equally, except this couldn't have happened at a worse time for one of those sides. I won't say which one, I'll let you guess. You kinda know the rest. This change allowed Trump to force through the appointments of 2 more justices, Kavanaugh and Coney Barrett, without any of the bipartisan cooperation that would have been required. This is why a lot of establishment Republicans tolerated Trump during his extremely embarrassing term. Because along with being just so very hilarious, Trump successfully appointed 226 judges to the trial, appellate, and Supreme Courts. When he left office, his picks comprised 1/3 of the Supreme Court, 30% of the 13 circuit courts, and more than 1/4 of the judges presiding over the nation's 94 district courts. He managed to appoint 54 judges to the circuit courts, which are the courts that have the final word on most appeals. Again, a very silly guy who didn't win the popular vote. Not democracy. Not even close. So while it might seem like this recent wave of conservative decisions are coming out of nowhere, in reality, McConnell and other conservatives have been working tirelessly for the better part of a decade to make their goals a reality. In fact, you could even argue that the plot extends much farther back, since the Federalist Society, a libertarian legal organization with direct ties to multiple SCOTUS justices, has made choosing and elevating judicial candidates one of its primary goals. We actually did a video on those guys and Leonard Leo, their former vice president. Cool vid, check it out if you're into judicial stuff. But going back to why it's all happening now, as in why we're getting so many opinion pieces about legislating from the bench, it also has to do with the fact that Congress has simply gotten worse at its job. It's no secret that there's less bipartisan cooperation in the House and Senate than there used to be. There are a bunch of reasons for this, but more importantly to this episode, the big reason nothing gets done in Congress these days is that the GOP has become singularly focused on becoming an obstructionist party. Thanks again to Mitch McConnell.
Our top political priority over the next 2 years should be to deny President Obama a second term.
CBS News has confirmed that Senate Republicans have collected signatures on a letter which pledges to block everything unrelated to tax cuts and spending during the lame duck Congress.
Sure seems that electing a black man really sparked something vindictive in Mitch and a lot of the GOP, as if having a non-white man in power was seen as a direct attack against the GOP. Weird how that happened. And so in the post-Bush era, we really saw this turn more than ever before. They became a party of digging their heels in the mud to stop any progress. Then Trump got elected, and they got their window to permanently anchor us with the judicial branch. As much as a failure Trump seemed to be, he really was a success for the GOP's obstructionist goals. It doesn't even matter that they don't have the majority. Cut to 2021, and Mitch once again said that he was 100% focused on stopping Biden's administration, just like he was with Obama.
Yeah, 100% of my focus is on stopping this new administration.
No focus on getting his own shit done. No policies he vocally supports or progress he wants to make. No vision for the country other than to reverse the direction we're going in. He's just singularly focused on stopping the other side from doing anything. Seriously, just listen to him as he struggles to describe the GOP's accomplishments when they were in power.
Our side takes a great deal of pride in the accomplishments that 3 consecutive Republican Senates have delivered for the American people. In 2014, our majority was elected to check and balance the last years of a lame duck presidency. In 2016, we were reelected to help ignite a real all-American economic comeback, rebuild and modernize our military, and fight for the forgotten corners of our country. Together with the Trump administration and a Republican House, we did just that. In 2018, we were rehired again on those strong results, especially the historic job market for American workers and our commitment to the judiciary.
How fucking vague and sad is that? Checks and balances on Obama, an economic comeback, rebuilding the military, and strong results. Oh, and let's not forget that commitment to the judiciary. Gee, wonder what that's about. Mitch goes on to say this about Biden's administration.
On the Biden administration's very first day, it took several big steps in the wrong direction.
For context, the steps Biden made on his first day were to re-enter the Paris Climate Agreement, halt the Muslim travel ban, revoke the permit for the Keystone Pipeline, mandate mask wearing in federal buildings, extend student loan pauses and eviction moratoriums, launch a government initiative toward racial equality, and a bunch of other things geared toward climate action. These are the steps in the wrong direction that Mitch must be referring to here. And so you have to wonder what the right direction is for Mitch. How does he define helping the American people if it's not trying to fight climate change and disease and inequality and debt? What does he want America to be? The answer really seems to be that he wants it to look like the America that existed when he was 20 years old, which, if you're wondering, was the goddamn 60s. So, I don't know. Seems bad that someone this out of touch has so much power and is wielding that power to stop any and all progress. Mitch McConnell's favorite whiskey is Old Crow because he says that's the whiskey that Henry Clay used to drink. Dude loves Henry Clay. And aside from the fact that Old Crow tastes like a rail yard suicide, perhaps we need to elect people who aren't so old that their idol is a haunted painting. Not that Biden is any younger or more in touch, but what do you expect Biden to do with a guy like McConnell? What can you do with that? How are we supposed to even attempt to cooperate with someone this openly antagonistic? And since this is the case, since good old Long Dick Crow is jamming up an entire third of our federal government, is it any wonder that the Supreme Court has expanded its purview? Hell, that was probably Mitch's plan all along. You stick a bunch of conservative judges into positions of power, jam up Congress, and let the judicial branch make laws instead. A branch of people handpicked by your minority party. Boy, it seems like the system done f***ed up, doesn't it? Seems like perhaps we need to rethink this whole America thing. Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Here's the evergreen end plate to ask you to like and subscribe. It's any day of the year where you are.